Hello, everyone. We'll begin in just a few minutes. I still see people are joining our webinar, and we have about 2 minutes to go until 3 o'clock. Okay, so I think that we're probably about ready to begin. I know some additional people will be joining us. So hello, I'm Jennifer Polinchuk. I'm the superintendent, and we have Eric Wetzel with us, Paula Reber, and Kathy Moser. And I want to thank them and you for joining us today for this webinar. We know that you have many questions about the opening of schools, and we know that you need information to make decisions for your children and family. So this webinar will outline the four reopening plans that the administrative team has developed for the Lewisburg Area School District. The team has used the guidelines provided by the Pennsylvania Department of Education and Health, CDC, local recommendations from health and safety experts, and the collaborative ideas from many educators and researchers in the region working in public schools and at Bucknell University. The format for this webinar will include an overview of the four reopening plans, which does include the two plans that we plan for reopening this fall. We want to emphasize the parents do have a choice, and unless the conditions change in the county or we have an order from the governor or other officials, we have planned for two contingencies, and we'll share what those plans are with you. Each school district's developed plans for reopening based on their community needs and available resources, but we're all working from the same guidelines. There will be an opportunity for participants to ask questions and voice concerns. That will be handled through the chat feature or the question and answer feature that I see is already being populated as we're speaking. School leaders knew that they were going to have to reopen schools at some point, and I want to share with you in this presentation that will take about 20 minutes or so with how we came to the point where we are, what are still certainly some unanswered questions for us as school leaders, and what you can expect when if your children are returning to in-person instruction, but also a little bit more detail about the options that are available to parents. So I'm going to just move to sharing my screen right now. Okay. And I'll just ask the administrators that are on with us here in terms of what you see to make sure that this is projecting correctly. It's been giving me a little bit of a difficult time.
It's at the end of the PowerPoint right
Okay.
now.
Right now, is it the front?
And now it's you and no PowerPoint slides.
Okay. Let me just exit this. Okay. It's been different each time, and I apologize if you would just bear with me. Let's try this one. Okay. Which does not let me. Okay, it should be coming on now. Do we see the first slide, Kathy?
We see the second, format and agenda.
Okay. Unclear on why it's doing that, but let's see if this works going through. Kathy, if you can just interject if we get lost, they have to restart it there. Okay. So format and agenda, that's what everybody has now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I just reviewed what the format would be. Next slide, speaking about our students and what we're expecting in terms of the students' needs. Kathy, is that there? Just want to make
Not
sure.
advancing.
Okay. Okay. Trying this again.
Now it has advanced.
Okay. All right, let's see. Do you just have the slide up? Yes. Okay, we'll try it this way. So once our students are coming back through our doors, we know that many of them are going to have a number of concerns in terms of they went home one day and had no idea that they wouldn't be returning to school. They, especially for our high school kids, this is a time of many of the high school activities and social events that are really part of the fabric of them growing into young men and women. And our students were left without that. Our seniors certainly the most impacted. And, you know, our juniors missing their proms and some of the things that we just wait for the springtime to help celebrate all the accomplishments and completing another year of high school and being closer to those next set of goals. But we also know that, you know, students are now in a place where they've been isolated, they've been feeling lonely, they've been frustrated. Our students now at this age certainly understand more about what's going on in the world. So they have questions, they have fears. They're apprehensive about what returning to school would look like in any form that the student does. We know that. And our job is going to be as much to ensure that they're safe, but to attend to those social and emotional needs that we know are very important for the students. So I know it's front and center on your minds as parents, as much as it is with us. And that's why the American Academy of Pediatrics is recommending kids be back in school if it can be done safely. It's more than just the education the students receive. It's all of the things that help them prepare for what they'll encounter in life. So how we ended up, and Kathy, I apologize for the choppiness of this, but do we have reopening schools? Yes, okay. Please interrupt me if we're off from where I'm talking. So many parents have had the question, and it's completely understandable as to what our plan is. Other districts have been releasing plans. And I really want for the community to understand that while we knew we had to reopen, guidance on how to reopen and what would be required really didn't start to come out in full force until July. So I have the different pieces of guidance that we received from the health and safety plan being required to with board approval, but to what needed to be included in that did not come out until later in July around the 16th. And then that's since been revised. So it's important for everybody to understand whatever we are planning for now, if we have additional guidance coming forward from either the governor or the Department of Education, we will have to go back and revise those plans. And that is why we're planning in 4 different directions for the possibility, and it's a very real possibility, that you know, things will shift in a way that our initial plan would not be able to be implemented. The next thing that we really needed to understand is the requirements, and this one piece here that I'll speak of in just a second with the number of school days and hours. Our school board will be approving the health and safety plan. What's different about how we're proceeding with this than other school districts, they might have presented that health and safety plan, which would have included the reopening plans at the same meeting. you as a community now have an opportunity to know what our plans are and to be able to ask clarifying questions and to have your concerns about those plans be heard before the board takes action on that. And that will be at a special meeting that will be in early August. The other is the fact that we are required by PA code to have 180 days of school, 900 elementary instructional hours, and 990 secondary instructional hours. By Act 13, the legislature and then later a law voted or signed by the governor relieved schools of that last spring. So we did not have to meet those requirements, and that helped school districts in their remote learning situation. Attendance didn't have to be taken. What was constituted instruction was relaxed in many respects. And we know that the plan going into this school year has to be different because that provision is not in place. What school district leaders were really struggling with is that if we were to have remote instruction, how could we do that and it count as the school day, which explicitly says it's in-person instruction with the assumption that we're in a schoolhouse. So it took a while for PDE to be able to provide us with guidance of how and specific language that we could use and steps we could take to count any remote instruction that might be occurring as the required number of hours and then days. So that really didn't come forward until July 6th. So this is, an explanation as to why things seem to be going so slowly in the planning process while the first day of school is coming ever nearer to us. We are following the guidelines that have come out from the Pennsylvania Department of Education and Health. Any governor's orders, which are sometimes then clarified, including the Department of Health's guidelines for schools. So but there may be different conditions in schools than would be true in a business or for the general public. And working with the Union County Department of Public Health or Public Safety and the CDC. We're also consulted with local health and safety experts from Geisinger Medical Center and Evangelical Hospital. So hopefully we're advancing here. I want to share with you what our two plans are right now and what our contingency plans would be should conditions change. So we're planning for in-person instruction, students to return to school 5 days a week, with Wednesday being the half day. Students would be released after lunch. And we are requiring face coverings and social distancing for all students and staff. And many of the features of school will be adapted in order to accommodate that. Many, as I will outline in a few minutes, are going to be building specific. So the principals, as they're working through their specific building plans, will be sharing that with the faculty, students, and the parents. Parents do have the option to enroll their students in the Lewisburg Area School District eSchool if that is a need that they have in terms of a concern or a need that they have within their family. So we want to make that very clear that we know we wouldn't even be discussing this if we didn't have this current situation with the pandemic. We want to provide you with the options and the information that you need in order to make that decision for your child. And it's important for the community to understand that there is choice. The eSchool is through a partnership with the Central Susquehanna Intermediate Unit. That program is what many other school districts are using. It's an online curriculum facilitated by certified teachers. Right now, the Lewisburg Area School District would have vendor-provided teachers instructing those courses. But if we have an enrollment of at least 15 to 20% of our students in grades K to 5, we can reassign one of the teachers of the section to be that eSchool teacher. The same can happen for the middle school and the high school. The high school will be a little more challenging because students are picking different courses in terms of their elective choices and even the types of math that they have, but there's a way that we may be able to work it. So it may also be that some courses we can have one of our teachers, some courses it may be the vendor provided teacher. Um, this will depend once we know what parents are choosing to do, then we'll be able to better inform parents as to how that would be scheduled. The next two plans are the hybrid plan and the remote learning plan. The remote plan would be used in schools are ordered to close again. And that's a distinct possibility. It may happen before school begins. It may happen at some point during the year. But again, we're operating under the assumption that the law is still in force with the number of days and hours that students need to be receiving instruction. This would actually be a synchronous learning environment, which means that if we follow our bell schedule throughout the day, students would sign into a Google Meet for their first period, have the instruction, the entire class is there. We can take attendance because we'll be able to see the students. And then when the bell would ring, there's time for, just a little break, and then you're into your next class. And this would happen every day, 5 days a week. So this would look a lot different than the experience that we had in the spring. This allows us to have the accountability that we need to have and to ensure that students are getting the full course of curriculum that they have in each of their subjects. So the next is the hybrid. That is a little bit different. I know many school districts are looking at hybrid options. What's important to keep in mind is school districts all have different sets of resources, and that is anything from personnel to the type of technology tools that they're using. We've looked at what we're able to do here and what our needs are within the community, and we would have in-person learning for our elementary students, and we would spread them amongst the 4 buildings for greater social distancing. And our secondary students would be receiving remote instruction. And again, that would be synchronous remote instruction. So it would look like the remote virtual learning option that we have. We know that the students, while it's not ideal to be in a virtual environment for all subjects, we know the students are more autonomous and they're able to navigate the technology and self-regulate their time better than our elementary students that do need a lot of support with the technology. So, we're monitoring the situation right now because of looking at what we have available within the district. We feel that the in-person learning is something that we would be able to do and still have the mitigation strategies in place to keep people as safe as possible. I know that there are school districts that are looking at 2 days in a cohort model, and then another cohort would come in for 2 days and the students would have 3 days on their own for remote learning. Some school districts, in the way that they're structured, they may be able to do that and still meet the minimum requirements. That would be a challenge for us to do, and that's why we did not select that option. I know that some school districts are also looking at Zooming in the classrooms so that students can have that option to just Zoom into class. And we're looking at policy around that, and there are many factors that go around live streaming that we want to be thoughtful about and work through. I would caution our community to consider that there will be possible and potential interruptions to instruction, as well as the high bar of accountability that we have to meet. We're really concerned about making sure that the students are getting the time and looking for a way to make sure that they're getting their instruction from our teachers. Because we've heard that from the community with those who've inquired already about the eSchool. They want our teachers, and I think that's a testament to the quality of our faculty, and we're looking for ways to ensure for that to happen. In addition, as parents are making their decision, I want to provide a little more information about our eSchool. So there are benefits to our students. They would remain our students. They're part of our daily membership. They would participate in all extracurriculars, clubs, and activities. So they're eligible to do that if they stay with us. Students would, certainly still receive the services that the district can provide. They would receive report cards from Lewisburg Area School District and also a diploma from Lewisburg Area School District. They would receive their instruction from a certified teacher, whether it be the vendor teacher or our teacher, and the parents would still receive all the communication. This is the most seamless way, if the conditions change and things can be relaxed in school, that students can ease right back into the in-person learning. There are benefits to the district as well. We stay in communication with the families, and there's a cost benefit in terms of the tuition to the eSchool as opposed to a cyber charter school that, I'll outline in just a second. Other options for parents. So there are brick and mortar charter schools, cyber charter schools, and private charter schools, or private schools, excuse me. So it is true that if a child attends either a brick and mortar charter or a cyber charter, that the parents do not pay a tuition. The tuition to those schools is paid by the school district. So it's about $4,000 to $5,000 for eSchool for the entire year is a tuition we would pay, and it's basically paying for the fees, like a licensing of a program or something akin to that. For a cyber charter school, it's $15,000 to $24,000, depending upon the grade level of the student and whether or not the student has an IEP. Those are funds that would come from our operating budget for this school year that would then be diverted and not be able to be used for our programming that we have. So that's why schools have some sensitivity to the cyber charter schools. Their delivery models, whether it be eSchool or cyber charter schools, are not much different. Private schools, of course, parents would be paying the tuition. Certified teachers. Charter schools are required to have at least 75% of their teachers certified. They may have more, but that's all they're required to have. Public schools are required to have 100% Pennsylvania certified. Private schools may not. They have different rules. It depends on the private school. Many might require a certification. That depends upon the school, so that's something to inquire. In many cases, of course, kids are being taught by mostly certified teachers that may be Pennsylvania or other state certifications. So it's important to know that. Mitigation requirements. So private schools are not required to do all of the health and safety planning. It's highly recommended, and I'm sure many are, but it's worth parents asking those questions if they're inquiring with a private school. And enrollment. So students are no longer enrolled in Lewisburg Area School District if they are charter school, cyber charter school, or private school students. So they're no longer, private school students are not eligible to participate in any of our activities and extracurriculars. Cybers are only eligible to participate in limited activities. And those tend to be the after school activities, not the in-person during the day activities. Homeschooling is another thing that we've heard that parents are asking about and looking to pursue. So that's a program that's been around for a very long time. And this is where a parent would select to educate their child on their own. There are some requirements for the parents from a school districts, and we are just accounting for students' compulsory age and ensuring that they're receiving an education. Parents are supposed to follow the standards, but they certainly can modify and deviate from that. They submit an application, the parent serves as the teacher, and they have to secure a private homeschool evaluation that just says that the goals set by the parent for the student were met. The diploma the student receives is a PDE diploma that is for homeschooling. So there may be implications for future educational decisions. So that's something we're looking into a little bit more to provide parents with some more information on that as to how, for example, colleges would look and review a homeschooling diploma or any transcript as opposed to looking at something coming directly from the school for all 4 years. Access to curriculum and materials. The district's required to provide the curriculum documents and textbooks, is not required to do more than that. Many parents do either join consortiums around homeschooling where there's a network of parents and students that work together towards this. Others form pods where parents, based on their comfort level with certain subject areas, might take on teaching math or science for a group of students. And that also provides a community for socialization for the students as well. They're all important things, and certainly we're here to help you to make the best decision for you. In terms of homeschooling, we can provide more support than we're required to do if parents are looking to explore that situation, but there still are some unanswered questions that are definitely worth your exploration if you're looking at any of these options for your children. Increasing the health and safety is paramount. I mean, that is what our plans are all built around, is to keep not just the students, but the staff safe. And if we think about the precautions that we've all heard about now with masking, social distancing, frequent hand washing, cleaning and sanitation, no one precaution itself will reduce everybody's risk. But if we layer them together and do them simultaneously, we are certainly lessening the risk for exposure to the virus. We also know, and many researchers are exploring, that air ventilation and filtration also has a factor with any kind of airborne disease or any particle that is in the air that can be an irritant to a person. So we are assessing how we can upgrade our ventilation and filtration systems in all of the schools so that we're breathing healthier air, not just during this pandemic, but all the time. Schools always have a flu running through them, or a stomach bug, or people have allergies. All those things are always happening every year, and it would be really in our best interest to have the healthiest air possible for everybody to breathe, so that fewer people are getting sick, even if it's from the normal ailments that we experience. So what to expect when students are returning back to school? And this would also be the case for the hybrid, where just the elementary students would be in. Again, just social distancing would be, certainly they'd be more distant than they were looking for them to be right now. Masks and face coverings are going to be required by everybody inside. There are times when students can take their masks off or let their masks go. And that is in the PDE guidelines for schools. It certainly, if they're eating or drinking, if they're seated at a desk or workstation, and definitely 6 feet apart from one another, or if they're in a designated mask break. So we are planning to have structured breaks where students otherwise aren't eating and drinking and seated 6 feet apart from one another, where they can take their masks down. That's also a recommendation from our Nurses Association of how to do the training with the younger students, but certainly we know it's important for them to have that time to have that break. Social distancing will occur everywhere in the school. We're looking at our classroom spaces, we're looking at our hallways, stairwells, communal spaces that exist within the school. We are getting the plexiglass shields to put around the desks that are portable. And again, that doesn't in and of itself protect everyone, but that is one of those layering strategies that we can have to help mitigate the spread of the virus and anybody's exposure to it potentially within the school. Moving on here. So we're going to ask parents to do the screening of their students before they come to school. So taking a temperature and checking for these different symptoms that they may have, keeping in mind that some of these symptoms are symptoms of other ailments. So a fever and a sore throat could also be a strep throat. So just because somebody has a fever in and of itself, it's not the only thing that's indicative of the potential for that student maybe having exposure to the virus. We're asking that students are kept home if they have a fever and any of these symptoms, and certainly are seen by a medical professional to determine what they need, because they may need that attention anyway. Students that will be arriving late to school will also be screened like visitors. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's the procedure that many of us might have encountered if we've gone to a doctor's office or anything lately, where we're asked a series of questions and our temperatures are taken. The nurse will take the temperature of any student who starts to develop the symptoms or any symptoms during the day, which is part of their routine practice. If a student goes down and isn't feeling well, has a headache and some chest congestion or something along those lines, that's the first thing the nurse is doing, is checking for the temperature. So that will happen again. If the student's not feeling well, has a temperature, then the nurse will then go through a protocol of isolating the student and making sure the student's masked, contacting the parent to come pick up the student, and advising that the parent take the child to see the primary care physician. Students, we're going to ask them not to return to school for 72 hours unless they are symptom-free, and including the fever. An exception to this could be that, let's say the child does go to the doctor, it is a strep throat, they're now on a course of antibiotics, fever's down, they feel well enough. We know that their symptoms were related to the strep throat and not COVID exposure. And doctors will advise that, on a case-by-case basis with their patients. We're looking at our attendance policies to allow for the fact that we know that students may be staying home for a longer period of time when they're not feeling well and for other reasons. And again, there's some things that are still unresolved for us, and that's all school leaders in terms of the law with compulsory attendance and how that's taken. So we're working through those details, but that's definitely something that we've been advised to start to plan for, and just the specifics of that will come once that guidance comes from the Department of Education. In terms of if whether or not we end up with a case of a COVID positive or suspected positive student or faculty member or staff member, if we're aware of it, then Ms. Moser or I are the two people who would communicate with the Union County Department of Public Safety. So that is clear direction from the Department of Education that we communicate to that agency, and then they are responsible for any of the contact tracing, notification, and quarantining recommendations. And it's not something that we decide. We may not even know who the person is, but if we, who may be in part of the contact tracing. So we don't necessarily get information about all those details, but anybody who would be in that situation, you would be contacted by the Department of Public Safety if you're part or your child's part of that contact tracing. Any communication that would need to go to the community would be done through the consultation with the Department of Public Safety and also our district solicitor. We still have to keep in mind that HIPAA is what protects anybody from sharing individual medical information about a person to an audience of any kind. We still have to abide by that. That's a federal law. So if we find out that we have a positive case, if that is shared, and that would be again in consultation with the Department of Public Safety and our council in the need to do that, how that would be framed, but who the individual is, we wouldn't be able to share that. So, this is something that I know many people are asking questions about, and I want to be clear about that we're very limited in the information that we can share. And that's true in any case with any kind of illness that might occur. Contact tracing is really a case-by-case procedure. It has to do with the length of time of the potential exposure, use of any mitigation techniques, whether they were enforced, which ones were being used, and the display of symptoms. So again, the order to quarantine would come from the Department of Public Safety, not from school district superintendents. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if one child or a staff member is positive that everybody in that room, that wing, that school has to be quarantined. It depends, and we would do this in consultation, and they really call and tell us what we need to do as opposed to it being a local decision. Quarantine is that period of time which an individual self-isolates to determine if the individual has symptoms. And we have to keep in mind that there are many illnesses that have very similar symptoms to COVID-19. So people could be out sick because they have just another type of flu. They could have a sinus infection. All of these types of things can happen. So it's not necessarily COVID as an explanation for a student or staff member's absence. Transportation is another area that we are still waiting for definitive guidance from the Department of Education about social distancing on the buses. We're going to encourage parents to drive their kids to school, pick them up from school, as well as to allow the eligible students to drive. On our buses, we'll have students 2 to a seat with family members together. Bus drivers will be wearing masks and face shields. Masks, face coverings must be worn by the students when they get onto the bus, during the bus ride, and when they're leaving the bus. and students will be assigned to seats, which is not the usual practice I know for high school students, but we do need to do that so that we are sure that people are seated in a fashion too, so that the first students getting on the bus can move to the back, and we don't have people passing each other in the hall there. And then the reverse of that when we're unloading the bus at the end of the day. And they will be cleaned after every run. Arrival and dismissal procedures will be different. It's necessary for each school. We really can't have kids congregating at the high school. They would have, depending on when the buses would drop them off, there could be over half an hour of time where they're held in one area of the building. Now they're going to have to come directly to their classrooms. We really can't let the students gather the way that we would normally have them doing during a non-pandemic time. We are going to look at the dismissal procedures as well, the doors that can be used to try and prevent crowding and a backlog of people trying to get in and out of the building. So those will be school-specific plans. In the classrooms, the instructional spaces will look much different than what students are used to. We really need to make sure that we have all the furniture removed that's non-essential so that we can have more room for desks and the teacher's desk. It's important to keep in mind too that there are formulas for calculating how many desks can fit into a classroom. When we know how many students are in that particular section, this may necessitate either that class moving to a different space or switching spaces in order to accommodate all the students. And that's something that will be, again, a building specific plan. It'll be some changes. If students are used to one particular class for something, it may end up having to be in a different location within the building. They will have their portable desk shields, and if there's an image of them there that they will be able to have. It doesn't replace the masking or the face covering or the social distancing, but it's another barrier if we're at any point less than 6 feet, which may happen as students get up to get something in the classroom or go up to ask a question or go to use the restrooms. That's going to happen. It's another protective measure. Other large group spaces will be used throughout the school. Special subjects, may be altered in some way, and where we can do things outside, we will. And some of the assignments, tasks, activities in those areas might be altered as well, just because they're designed for kids to do things in groups, but now they really can't be. So, we'll look at that, and we know that that's going to have to change. There may be times that students are in close proximity, and the best example of this would be a lab class where students do have to read an instrument or data from an instrument, and we're looking for them never to be more than 5 minutes in close proximity, and definitely with their face coverings on. And, but we'll look at ways to modify that so that we're reducing the amount of time that students would be in that situation. Hallways and movement through the schools will be much different. We're looking at one-way or traffic patterns of, dotted line in the middle of the floor, and all traffic going either up or down the hallway stays there. Students will have their backpacks with them so that we're not creating the crowding around the lockers. They will have access to bathrooms, but they'll be monitored for crowding. And water fountains will just be the touchless bottle filling. All the spigots will be disabled, and so students aren't taking water by mouth. Group settings will be modified for social distancing. Visits to the nurse's office, we're looking to have the Band-Aids and ice packs and things that students might go to the nurse for in a different location, just because we may have sick kids that are in the nurse's office and we'd want to reduce the traffic. Our nurses are really going to be a big part of the health response that the school has if there's a student displaying symptoms or just students that might be ill for other reasons. And visits to the office will be limited to essential needs. And, I know sometimes kids have to call home because plans changed after school or they forgot something. So looking to have students, using their own cell phone under the supervision of a staff member so that they're using it for the appropriate reason. Next, cleaning and sanitation. So our buildings and classrooms, bathrooms are cleaned every day. We actually have 2 crews And that normally happens. You have the day crew, and then you have the evening crew where most of the cleaning occurs. So we're increasing the cleaning, the wiping of the high touch surfaces in classrooms, offices, and all spaces using EPA approved disinfectants and electrostatic sprayers or misters. Those enable the rooms and bathrooms in particular to be cleaned more thoroughly, and provides the custodians with some more time to do some of the manual wiping that will need to occur. Desks will be wiped, not just the top, but underneath, as you can see here from this image. Other technologies are being investigated in terms of improving the air quality that we have within the building. And we're asking that students only use soap and water and towels if there is something that they would need to wipe and clean. There will be signage everywhere reminding students to wash their hands or sanitize their hands, wear their masks, social distancing, all of those precautions, as well as directional signage so that they know how to move throughout the building. Lunch, well, we don't have recess at the high school, and masking breaks. So lunch procedures will be different in each of the buildings. You know, we need to make sure that the students are 6 feet apart. And Ms. Reber and I looked at the cafeteria space, and you have that outside courtyard space that we'll be able to use. And, you know, hopefully, you know, we don't have a very rainy fall or, you know, winter. We'll have to assess what that will look like. But there may be times too that students might be taking their lunch in the classroom. We'll have a simplified menu. The buffets will be closed, any self-service. So our food service department's already looking at that so that, you know, kids will have the nutritious lunch that they're supposed to have, but doing it in a way that's easy to be able to ensure they're getting that and still keep that social distancing. They can take masking breaks, which will be structured, and we'll make sure students are definitely at 6 feet or more apart when that happens. According to the guidelines, they can take their mask down when they're eating, and that's the reason for the 6 feet apart when we're at lunch, because they won't have their masks on while they're eating. And, you know, there's certainly for certain activities like gym class where they may be running or exerting themselves, they can have their masks down, and we'll do that outside as much as we can. Hand washing and sanitizing, many sanitizing stations are up. So if there isn't a sink with soap that they can use, they can at least sanitize their hands before and after eating. And the other are recess procedures. Other things that will change in the schools, we'll have really non-essential visitors will be limited or restricted. Anybody, including students arriving late, will go through the health screening, which is a series of questions and the temperature. Volunteers will really be limited and go through the same procedure if we do have any as our visitors. Field trips will be postponed, and, you know, clubs will be moved to a virtual setting. Facility use by outside groups will be restricted. We really want our custodians focusing on the additional cleaning, and rather than the setting up and the breaking down of what those different groups might need for the space. And guest speakers will be restricted or conducted virtually. So that's an overview of where our plans are. Our next steps will be, of course, to answer questions that parents may have, but also to develop a frequently asked guide. So, you know, and this will be an iterative process. So as more questions emerge or guidance is revised, which would then change some of our procedures, then we will continue to update that. We're looking to also create an frequently asked guide for our teachers as well as the students, so that they know from their perspective what's going to be expected of them and answer some of the questions that they may have. We're going to add many more resources to our website, including, you know, updates on the different guidelines that are coming out so parents can see what the documents are that we're using to construct our plans. A survey will be going out regarding transportation, whether or not students will be riding the bus, and also a commitment to the Lewisburg area school district eSchool, because when we know what students will be taking that option or any other option, and they won't be returning for in-person instruction, we will then know how available some of our teachers will be to be able to be those teachers for the eSchool, but also it'll help with the sectioning that we have and scheduling of students so that we can ensure that we're getting as close to that 6 feet as possible. And, the goal is to have that in place in each of the classrooms. So, Paula, if I can call upon you to help facilitate the questions that we have.
All right, I tried my best to kind of group things together by category, and then I'll go back through and skim for any more that I missed. The first couple deal with masks. One is for the CDC guidance, masks should be removed by the ear loops and placed directly into the washer, never touch the front, wear on the neck, etc. How will this be possible in a school setting to prevent self-contamination?
So, with the CDC guidelines that we looked at in terms of opening schools, I would have to check that again to see if that's listed under the specific guidelines for schools as opposed to just mask handling in general. And again, we're looking at the Department of Education is using the CDC guidelines, but in collaboration with those two departments, they developed what would be possible in schools with the okay of the Secretary of Health. So I'm not sure where that is, but I will definitely check that to see.
Another one with masks regards the enforcing of masks when a student may choose not to wear one.
Okay, so we're going to require students to wear them. So if a student, has the mask off because let's say they forgot to put it back on and now they're in closer proximity to another student or staff member, this is reminders. We're going to ask teachers to just remind students to do what's being asked of them to do. If a student is rising to the level of being defiant and not wanting to wear the mask, there are two avenues that we can take. One is, first, if a student has a health condition that makes the mask difficult for them, there's a process that we have to be able to determine what a more appropriate face covering might be for that student given their health needs. We want them to be engaged in school and part of the instruction. We truly do. If this is just that the student doesn't want to wear a mask, then this is a conversation with the principal. We're not asking the teachers to really go much further than reminding students about what they're being asked to do. If it comes down to the student doesn't want to wear the mask, it's the conversation with the principal, conversation with the parent. And if there's no resolution there, then we would have a conversation about what the best option might be for educating the student in what setting that would be. The masks they're not the end all be all. It's all of these measures together. But in order to have the schools operate with a less chance of anybody getting sick, and this isn't students and staff members included, we need all of these measures to be working together. And, I do have the authority to make, some decisions on the part of what would happen with the students. And I truly hope that it doesn't get to that. If parents are really uncomfortable with masking, again, this might be where we're looking at some alternatives from the beginning about how to still keep education going. And with the eSchool, if this gets relaxed, and hopefully it does. But if it doesn't, we have to be prepared for this for the entire school year. One of the things that the high school students don't have to worry about that all of our students K-8 do is the fact we have air conditioning. So parents of the younger students are much more concerned about just feeling hot with the mask. So it's definitely a more comfortable environment. I know nobody wants to wear a mask. I don't like wearing a mask, but I will be wearing a mask because that's the right thing to do.
Keeping in that same vein of, kind of the protocols that we're putting in place, we are getting the desk shields for the high school also. And one of the questions was what the cleaning for those. It'll be one per student. So it's not that the desk shield stays there, but the student will be taking them with them.
The briefcase, when they're carrying it, has a handle. Yeah.
Another thing that has come up is about the 6 feet apart and how we are doing that at the high school where, you have larger children and more students in a space. Again, the guidance is 6 feet when feasible. They have to be 6 feet apart or else wearing a mask. We have those built-in masks, mask breaks, already incorporated in a part of the schedules and things. I don't know about Dr. Polishuk, if you want to talk about that anymore.
Right. So, what we'll do is we'll have markers on the floors for, where the desks would be. They just naturally shift as people are sitting in them, but to make sure we line back up we're on our spot, because we know that is 6 feet away from the nearest desk. So that will help with determining, just the normal movement that happens in a classroom. Same thing when we're waiting in line, much what you see at the grocery store, where you're asking people to stand 6 feet apart. But, the reality of it is no school can guarantee that no child will come less than 6 feet from the next person. That's the reason for the mask. It's that secondary measure, because it's something better than nothing if two kids get too close to one another. And, and I know that for many parents, there's a concern over that. And there's, positions out there, even with the experts in health and safety, about, is it masking or is it social distancing? A lot is pointing in both directions. I know that masking is something we can enforce, and face coverings. The social distancing, we are making the best attempt we possibly can. And if we have these layered precautions, this mitigates everybody's risk.
The next set of questions I'm going to take is around the hybrid, and so what needs to happen for us to have a hybrid model?
So for us to shift to it. So we anticipate that there could be something similar to what happened with the governor's latest mitigation order, where initially businesses were open at 50% capacity, or restaurants used specifically for indoor seating. And then that got reduced to 25. There's a lot of pressure coming to the governor, quite honestly, and Secretary Levin, on how schools can do all that's being asked for them with just what the resources are that we have. Some of it just being literally our physical buildings that we can't change. We can't make them bigger. So it's possible that we might be ordered to go to only a 50% capacity of what we have. So we're prepared for that if that happens. Also, if our conditions change in the county and we need to take more restrictive measures, we move from the green to the yellow, as an example, where again, we're shifting to remote instruction as we're starting to get into those territories. But again, this may be revised. We have a plan in place already for what would happen, and we really want to make sure that our parents know what that would be, so that it's not a surprise. If we have to become more restrictive, then we're going to do that using the hybrid. And our elementary parents also know that either way, if they're coming for in-person instruction, that students would be in schools. They might very well be in a different school because they'll be spread amongst the four. But we wanted to make sure parents had that, so that they have the planning they need to do with the small children. We know remote for students, again, not ideal, but we know our secondary students can handle it. And what's important for parents of high schoolers to know is that it would be synchronous. Now, it might not start at 7:30 in the morning. It might be at 9, because there's no real reason to get up at 7:30 in the morning, really. But that you'll still have the same length of student day, so parents can know also what to expect and what their kids are doing if they're at work or doing something during the day, where their kids are. They should be in class, even though it's virtually.
Another one that has come up just in regards to the hybrid, just to clarify that 6 through 12 would not be in person, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Wetzel, can you do me a favor? I've gotten to I compiled kind of the first 45 questions and what was in the chat, but I see that about 20 some more. So if you want to start to work on kind of compiling those next set. There's a couple of questions about staggering of the times, and things like that. If it's okay, I can kind
Yeah.
of address that one. That is certainly something we're looking at as we're looking at our bell schedule. We also are looking those students that would have had a study hall first or last period of if they have transportation or if they drive, allowing just those students coming in later on those days or leaving earlier, which would help with the arrival and the dismissal time. There's a question about when students will get their schedules. That will be after August 7th. So most likely you'll receive it in the mail that next week then. Again, some things could change in terms of what section they're in, just based on the survey data that we get, but that's part of why we're trying to wait a little bit to send it out so that we don't keep changing that on kids. Another question that's coming up is if we're going to have some type of orientation for the ninth graders. And I can say absolutely that's one of the things that we've been in discussion a lot. We realize our ninth graders didn't get a chance to come over as eighth graders to have their preview days. They didn't have that opportunity to certainly become acclimated. And so we're looking at a variety of things that we can do there with the ninth graders, and we will make sure that we send you that information.
To jump in on that, we may have the first student day just be all of the new students to each building. So new to Lintown, new to the middle school, new to the high school, so that they have that opportunity, and even kindergarten. So they have that opportunity to have the orientation, but also get used to the building, because again, there's going to be some restrictions. It's one thing about, oh, that's the one-way stairwell, but you don't even know where the stairwell is because you have no orientation to the building. So, and it's a way, you already have the anxiety of going into a new school. How can we help kids feel more comfortable, and still accomplish what we would have normally accomplished last spring?
The next one is about teacher training and professional development, so that if we do have to go to a remote scenario, if we are better prepared for that at this time.
Yes, we are. And that's why we will have synchronous learning. We'll have, certainly teachers will be working with elements of the curriculum they currently have, but there will also be some consistent expectations about, what normal school looks like. The students are going to receive grades. So, we're expecting that, there are tests and papers and all of the other types of things that students would be doing. Naturally, some things might not be able to happen because we're in remote, but we're in a much better position for that.
Some other questions came up about surrounding attendance and truancy. I think you did address that we would be very flexible with those, certainly. I know one of the questions was, if their child has to be quarantined, would that be counted against them, which certainly we would not refer that case to go to the magistrate. And also I saw that our magistrate is actually on this Zoom now and has offered his assistance with us as we go through those things. So I want to say quick shout out and thank you to Jeff for that.
However, I do want to interject that if we're all remote and attendance is being taken and student is not there, and the teacher can tell because the Hollywood Square box would reflect everybody that's on the Google Meet. And then we may use another platform too that's a little bit more robust, like a Zoom. But nevertheless, they have to log in and be in that class, or, one of our issues with remote overall is also too bandwidth and some of the instability with internet. So, we're thinking about solutions for that so that a child isn't not able to access, and then all of a sudden we're following up with, truancy. We don't have a desire to take kids there, but if it's something outside of their control, of course, we're going to be reasonable and try and help solve that problem.
There are a couple of questions about the Zooming and why we're not able to do that now. For instance, there's some questions about some other districts doing that. And I know that, we've been, explaining how if a parent does not want their child to be taped and things, why can't they be moved? So why can't it just be the majority rules in that situation for Zoom?
So even the districts that have announced that they're doing this, they are being advised and in the process of getting a policy for live streaming adopted by their board. there's a sample policy. You know, there are a number of hurdles, and that's why it hasn't been done before, even for kids that may be out on homebound or for a limited amount of time to Zoom into a class. The policy basically says this is what the expectations are of the staff and of the student. So one very solid example of that is dress code. So we would expect that students are dressed like they're coming dressed for school, at least from the top up, as many of us have been in our professional situations lately. But, you know, again, what's appropriate in terms of what to wear, and that they're not doing something inappropriate. And students would be referred, you know, to Mr. Wetzel for an inappropriate t-shirt, just like they would if they were coming to school. And, you know, we take discipline from there. The other is that it's about rights. And if a parent, we have to notify parents that the class may be Zoomed and provide an opportunity for them to voice that they do not give permission for their class where their child is currently rostered to be Zoomed. How we would handle that, you know, would be one of two things: either the class isn't Zoomed, or we would remove the child. And again, even in Zoom, even though we could fix the camera on to the teacher, it can still pick up all the audio from the classroom. So we need to think about that, because whose rights outweigh the others? There are a number of FERPA, HIPAA, and other legal considerations. How we would handle if the Zoom was recorded, and what happens to that. Now, while the students wouldn't have the ability to do that on Google Meet, they can, but what would happen to that video if it's posted on YouTube or something along those lines? So I know it sounds like a lot of doomsday scenarios, and many of the people I know that are asking this, that their kids, they don't think would do these things, and I don't think vast majority of our kids would. But like anything in emergency planning, we always have to think about what could happen and what our response is. I think it's an elegant solution. We also have to think of the logistics of how that student's participating and the level to which they can participate if they're remote, as opposed to seeing all their classmates in person, and what a discussion would look like and how that could be facilitated. All of that has a lot that needs to be worked through in order to make it really effective. And we don't want the reverse of a child feeling like they're just peering through a window into a classroom in which they can't truly participate. So, you know, we're looking at those things, but first and foremost, every district needs to have a policy on how to handle this.
The next set of questions, there's quite a few around band, orchestra, choir. Just in terms of how we're handling that in general, we do still have that in the schedule. I've been meeting with Mr. Schwanger and Mr. Walls and Mr. Jones. We have a Zoom meeting tomorrow afternoon. They've been working on, you know, how they can still have their instruction and things. With that, again, we're looking at alternate spaces and different social distancing and safety protocols. So the question that has come up several times is, if parents opt for the eSchool option, can their students, since band, chorus, and chorus are an orchestra, since they're co-curricular, are they also able to still take advantage of the school district's co-curricular activities?
So if we have to think about, if there are classes, and thinking of it as a class, if it's meeting during the day, and it could meet also at any point in the day in the schedule, depending upon how the schedule is built this year. The schedule is never different. It's different each year because of what students are requesting.
And I'm going to just pop in for 1 second and say that we do have our orchestra, band, and the choral ensembles, except for ninth grade choir. We do have the choirs and the orchestras blocked in the first 2 periods of the day. So they are at the beginning of the day.
Okay. So we're looking at this in terms of cohorting, and how there are recommendations from the CDC specifically about school districts to consider cohorting, where students would be with the same constellation of students to reduce, again, external exposure risks coming to them. And understanding that students switch classes and they're in different classes, but based on, generally speaking, the types of courses they're taking, they end up with some of the same students, if not sometimes two kids have almost exactly the same schedule throughout the day, depending upon what they select. So we understand that students want to participate in these things. This is really something that they enjoy doing, particularly students that might not be academic. This is where they can excel because they have a talent and a skill, and their friends are there. All of those things, we understand that that's there. But we really need to consider, and we're reviewing, there's the whole other end of safety in terms of knowing who's in the building at what time, how students would be able to get there if they don't have their own transportation or a parent can't provide it for them. Making sure that, again, the risk of exposure, they still have risk. And is it more or less risk because they're only there for that duration of time? So, those are things that, we're looking at. And I know this is very difficult for parents as well as for the students, but our initial way of looking at eSchool is that students would participate in those activities that would be outside of the school day that aren't graded activities. So this would be like a sport or a club that would meet after school. That's where we initially had this. We know we've had many requests. That then cascades into certain classes that students want to take, whether it be an advanced placement course or something along those lines, because arguably their experience is going to be different and probably more robust in person than not. But then, where those things are scheduled, what would be available, because what's first period, what's at the end of the day, we'd have to treat all of those things equally, and also to think about requests of a similar nature that would be happening in the other schools where, certainly kids aren't driving. And, it's not a direction that we're going in right now. And there are a lot of reasons why that's a concern. And I completely understand that, but, to give people an answer of where we are right now, it's not something we're looking to have within our in-person or virtual school.
And then regarding the eSchool, there have been some people that have just had questions about how they get more information on it, about courses and things. I did, for people that were looking in the Q&A, if you saw it, I did share that Mrs. Moser or you should be their first contact point. In terms of our classes here at the high school, our classes, I believe all of them are available in the eSchool catalog. And if there's something that doesn't match up perfectly, then we try to find the next closest one to be able to. Sometimes that happens like with the arts. So for instance, with ceramics, if people, if you don't have access to a kiln, that could be a little bit difficult to do. So that typically is the area where something might not match up, but overall they match up very closely. There are AP classes in the eSchool part of it. There's some question about like if they start eSchool, are they able to come back or vice versa? So could you speak a little bit to kind of almost a rolling admission type of an aspect of how students go in and out between the eSchool and the in-person schooling?
Ms. Moser, I'll let you answer that. I know you.
I'm happy to. When it's not COVID pandemic, seriously, we've been able to have families indicate a need or a desire to go into our eSchool, and through the school counselors sit down, schedule rather quickly and easily, turn it around and submit the course requests through the IU, open those courses within 24 to 48 hours, and the student begins. Coming back from eSchool to regular school, we've worked with families in every imaginable situation. Easiest is to do it by marking periods, simply for the transference of grades and the clean accountability that, again, school structures appreciate. these are certainly very different days. These are certainly very different circumstances, and the volume of number of families K to 12 looking at this option means I think we have to be more nimble, more agile. You're hearing those words used a lot. I think we have to be more responsive to families, and at the same time, keep the accountability, keep the effort to register and open courses and close down courses for that matter and bring students back. If the student didn't begin with us and then wants to re-enter and they're in middle school or high school, it takes a day to open up the scheduling and see where the classes are that have openings and see what the rosters are. So I think I want to generalize and say, we appreciate whether it be the attendance and truancy challenge, or in this case, the registration challenges with moving back and forth. The students in eSchool are our students. We want to be responsive. We're certainly going to be working through it with every family and in every situation that we can. And we now need to work with our counselors, share this list of potential families, share these email contacts and phone contacts that we've had, each of us receiving some of those, and make sure that we are reaching out or responding to everybody's correspondence with us about the eSchool, and then working with our school calendar and our many other things that are going on right now, and get this information out and set up a process and a protocol for registration that is workable for us. But again, hoping to be very responsive and hoping to be somewhat flexible to help everybody set their students up for success.
We've had a couple of other questions about activities and clubs, and certainly we are limiting our participation out at academic competitions. Most other places aren't offering them even in person at this time. Fall play was one that specifically came up. Actually, Mrs. Freeberg and I have been in conversation about that. We're looking at, instead of having that in the fall, possibly shifting it, just because the timing of it in the middle of November, we don't feel that that is the best feasible.
I could just interject there real fast. So one of the other considerations with the fall play or even a musical is that we cannot have a gathering of more than 25 people indoors. So there really wouldn't be an opportunity for an audience right now. And video or streaming, we need to secure the licenses to do that from the publishers of the play or the musical, which depending upon what's done can be very, very expensive. So some of it is also a consideration of, I know we could manage and stage socially distant, and it's a group of kids just together that would be working on, especially play tends to be a fairly small ensemble, but we have to think about the fact we might not even be able to have an audience. So that may be a good reason to push it to later. Hopefully we'll be in better times.
There also, just for those of you who are familiar with the high school schedule, we typically in our midday after our second block, periods 3-4, we've had flex. We've talked a little bit about the arrival and the dismissal. So we are not going to be having that flex time this year. That will actually be divided up to help provide that coverage so students can go directly to their homeroom or advisor in this case. We haven't had homeroom, but their advisor will be their homeroom teacher. And then likewise at the end of the day, go back to that person, and then we can do that staggered dismissal from there. So that is a way that the schedule will look different. And also that was when the majority of our clubs met, so that again we'll need to be looking at doing some of those virtually and online in the near future. So another question that came up, somebody had asked about the filling stations, and there were two that they turn off during the summer, and if they're working, I can say I hydrate with my 64 ounces a day. Yes, they are up and working. And let's see, there's some concerns with the backpacks and how that might conflict with what we previously have done for school safety. And I know that, you know, that's something that we've had a conversation about. So can you please address that?
So in some respects, many of even the guidelines that are coming out from the Department of Education are in direct conflict with the guidelines and conversations we were having last year. And, you know, irony isn't even the right word in this situation, but it makes, again, it makes many school leaders shake their heads and feel very frustrated because, you know, we're talking about having more classes outside, which, you know, again, there was a lot of restrictions on how we're outside in spaces and making sure we're contained and ready for a reverse evacuation should we need to do that. You know, certainly using more than one door, while the doors would be locked and manned by a staff member to open and close them, but, you know, not having those entry points and all of the cameras that are in schools are focused in on these particular areas on purpose and by design. So backpacks are another one, you know, that a student could have something in it that, you know, could be of harm or concern. So two things, if we suspect that a student has something or we get notice that a student has something, we have a different threshold than the police. We have reasonable suspicion. So if we hear something or we suspect something, we have the authority to check that backpack. Not saying we're going to have random spot backpack checks, but it's a power that we do have in school that gives us a little bit more control over it than if a police officer suspects a student walking or a person walking down the street with a backpack and thinks something might be in there. They certainly need more. You know, we're looking at just the function of how to get to a locker and how they're in close proximity and how to get all the students through getting in and out of their locker and all the times they may need to do that throughout the day and congesting hallways that we're now going to have to restrict movement on, and the potential for kids stopping and talking and all of that and congregating is what we're really attempting to mitigate here. The intention with this is, and you know, we know with kids who we've taught them to do something one way, hopefully they have the muscle memory to remember that it goes right back to the way it used to be because that's the safest option for us. So the answer for us is for staff also to be more vigilant, which I think they will be anyway, just in monitoring all of the social distancing and other kinds of mitigation strategies that we have in place.
There was a question about whether custodial staff will have proper PPE, which of course they will. Let's see, what else is there? A question about cyber charter and athletics. So not the e-school, but cyber charter and athletics.
Yeah. So the students are able to participate in athletics, anything that happens outside of the school day, if they are a charter school student.
There was also one, I have to find it here now, which was like having students sign waivers that they know the risk, similar to what was in the athletic and
so students also, I mean, waivers are also included with athletics in terms of the risk of playing the sport. And again, in terms of waiving liability, we've received legal guidance that states that the waiver isn't necessary because it's a larger question about what schools' liabilities are with the opening. But we at this time are not going to have waivers for kids to sign in order to return back to education.
Some people also wanted to know if you will email the presentation or if it's posted so that they're able, like if their spouse isn't able to watch it right now, if they would be able to watch later.
So this is being recorded and this recording will be posted on the website, and I can also post a PDF of the PowerPoint.
There is, again, some confusion just back to in-person, like what our options are right now, which are just the first two options, which is eSchool and the in-person. Remote would be if we have to get completely shut down again, and then the hybrid, which is not an option right now. So please correct me if I didn't say that correct. Mr. Wetzel, I'm going to turn it over to you just to make sure that I got the majority or most of mine answered, or if it was something that just one person had, I'll try to respond just to them.
And in the interest of time and for the length of time the Zoom is set up, I don't want it to shut off because I scheduled an hour and 15 minutes for this. If questions aren't answered, they will be answered in an FAQ. I've been receiving questions as well, and I'm working to get back to people. So please feel free to answer or email me. And if I can't answer it, it's something specific to the building, I will send it to Ms. Reber. It'll take me a couple of days to cycle through all of the questions because we have a lot of Zooms scheduled in between, as well as we're doing this with our staff. So we'll take 2 or 3 more questions, and then we'll bring it to a close.
Mr. Wetzel, you want to take these?
Yeah, quite a few of them really you've touched upon. There were a couple of just wondering why a hybrid is not an option or not feasible from day one, with referencing some other districts that have moved towards that as an option. So just kind of looking into why that's not a possibility with us starting the year.
Well, when we looked at the hybrid, we were looking at it from the lens of if we can't have all of the students in the building and be able to do the safety precautions that we need to do. So the safety precautions would be the same with the hybrid. We're looking at the fact that in-person instruction is the best mode of delivery as opposed to remote. However, we know that the secondary students can handle that if need be. Schools that are doing hybrids in the area, some are doing where they're only bringing in elementary students and the secondary students are remote. Some that are doing 2 days in and 3 days remote, in all told, because of the way that would have to be delivered, and this depends upon how they're implementing their current curriculum, we've the potential of looking at kids really getting through less than or around 50% of the content. And when you're looking at secondary school students, you're looking at students with courses like AP courses that have a large content to cover for those AP exams. We're concerned that the students won't be prepared for what they need, and the requirements and requisite requirements the kids have before they can take another type of class moving forward. So especially from a secondary end, it can present a lot of other challenges and limit choices and opportunities for kids moving forward that I know we're not thinking about next school year or the school year after, but those are the considerations we had in making that decision.
There's another one about the 25-person limit. Does that apply to classes or organizations like band? And no, that is only for public gathering. It doesn't count for instruction. So for instance, if we had our school board meeting or if we had a faculty meeting, then we would have to adhere to that, but that does not apply to classes or instructional periods.
On July 24th, the Department of Health updated their guidelines for schools specifically. You know, since this is high school, the other thing it does, if sports are, PIAA has not made a decision about fall sports. We're in season come August 10th. I suspect that they'll be making a decision at some point around there if they're going to cancel, postpone, or what their decision will be. But since spectators would fall under the public category, we can't have more than 250 people at any of those events, because then that's an outside venue. Of course, if it was basketball or wrestling, you know, that would be inside and be limited to 25. That's where it stands right now. That can all change and change multiple times by the time we even get to that point. We have one more to.
I guess the last one here, how will LASD decide whether schools will be closed? Will it be building by building or district wide? And does the DPS make this decision?
So if the governor orders, of course, that's the governor ordering. If there's a need to close a school, and it can happen, and this has not happened here in this area from what I understand, but it does happen in school districts where there's a really bad flu. We saw this with the norovirus a couple of years ago. And just for the purposes of really doing a deep clean and also for the fact that we had so many staff members sick that we wouldn't be able to safely operate the building. The schools have closed for that day. So it can happen two ways. I can make that decision. I have the authority to close a school or the district, much like a snow day or a weather event. But also we could be instructed to do so by the Department of Public Safety. Okay, so I really want to thank everybody for their time this afternoon. I know that I wouldn't have gotten through all your questions. I know even through this presentation, it's probably generated more questions. You understand where we are. We're just like, we feel like we have our hands around something, then we have other cascading questions that come up when we're thinking about what would that look like in real time with people. And, you know, it's a struggle not just for Lewisburg, it's a struggle for all school districts really around the nation as they're looking for reopening. And even just to go remote presents a number of additional challenges. So, you know, we know it's the best thing for kids for them to be in school and in person. You know, we want to do that in a way that they can be safe. And when conditions change and there's any concern over safety, then, you know, my first reaction is to preserve that safety of the students and maybe go to a less desirable option. But if that's going to protect our students and our staff, then that's what we'll need to do. And if we're looking for definitive answers to some things, it's difficult to give them to you because the guidelines we have today, as we're on the Zoom, we might have gotten new guidelines because that's kind of the way of it, as Ms. Moser's laughing there. And I don't mean to be tongue in cheek with this, but that's the reality that we're working in. But we have been working diligently well before I came on board July 1. And, you know, we're optimistic, but guardedly so that, you know, we'll be able to get through this entire school year and kids will have a good experience. So, you know, I do thank you again. Please feel free to email me anything that you have, you know, specifically that wasn't answered, and look forward to more communications, very regular communications coming from the school district to keep you in touch with us and help you make the best decision for your students. Okay, so have a good afternoon, everybody.